I was complaining to the rep of the company, the medical equipment company that we were buying from. She said, well, actually, we're going to be recruiting in this area quite soon. And then as luck would have it, I ended up getting that job that she was talking about. Never really done sales before and never considered myself as a salesperson, and probably spent most of my time in that job convincing people that I wasn't a salesperson, which turns out to be quite a good sales tactic. I used to say all the time, I just want an easy life. And I said it just a couple of weeks ago to a friend of mine, and she said, what are you talking about? Like that's not your personality at all. You are constantly finding the most difficult way and challenging way to do something and then trying to do it differently again. I started this business with the mindset, I'll just drop ship every box. I won't ever touch a box. It's the modern way. I'll just build a website. It'll make sales. I'll use my connections. It'll be easy.
Hi everyone, you're listening to the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know I started this podcast because over the years I've had hundreds of the most inspiring conversations of my life with small business owners, and they really helped me grow and scale my own business and get my mindset right even when times were really tough. I wanted to capture those conversations and make them available to other small business owners who are following in my footsteps, and I've just got a small request. If you enjoy this episode, if you find it really inspiring, if you find it helps you in your own business, then please just like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The more subscribers we get, the more we can invest in making the podcast better. So enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, you're watching Unrelenting Drive, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Mark from Simmons Skills. Mark, please tell the audience what you do.
So I run a company called Simmons Skills. We sell medical training equipment.
That sounds super exciting. We'll get into that later in the episode, but before we do that, what would be really good is to just build a bit of context and understand how you got from really where you were in education to starting out in your career, and how you built up your business.
Sure. So my path has been probably not typical. I suppose, well, not many business owners have a typical path. I studied music technology at university, and never expected to end up where I've ended up. But I just followed what I enjoyed, which was music, and thought I might be in a band or run a studio or something like that. It wasn't to be, and I kind of finished my course or dropped out of university the first time round, and needed to get a job. And one of the jobs that I applied for was in the ambulance service, driving non-emergency transport vehicles, so taking people to appointments and things like that. And I actually quite enjoyed it. So I ended up working in the ambulance service for 10 years. Okay. I went through from the non-emergency to the emergency side and became an emergency medical technician. Okay. And yeah, it's quite an interesting job. And I loved it and thought I'd never do anything else. And then I hurt my back and realised that I needed to maybe rethink. I was 20 when I joined, and the retirement age that then was 68. Okay. And so I had to kind of a realisation that I may not be able to do it until I'm 68. And not many people can, to be honest. There's not many that manage more than 10 years because it's a demanding job. You have to lift people. And
psychologically, it must be pretty demanding, right?
Yeah, I think it is. Back then, I didn't think of it like that. I was 20 years old, thought I knew everything.
But you must be turning up some pretty horrific scenes, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, I've seen stuff that still haunts me to this day. Yeah. But it's not the stuff that you would expect. It's not the kind of traumatic, loads of blood, car crashes. It's the little things that I won't go into here, but it stuff affects you in ways that you don't realise until years later. Yeah. How
did it change you in terms of your character?
I don't really know, because I was so young. I don't want to say I didn't have a character, but it's kind of all I knew. I joined,
you're like a blank slate.
I joined at 20, kind of fell into it and just went with it, but didn't have the same sort of existential questions that I have now. Am I doing good in the world, and how am I affecting my kids and that sort of thing? Like when you're 20 years old, you just kind of live life in the moment. I think that's how I look at it now, anyway. So yeah, it's difficult. But it's given me a great perspective on everything that I've done since and what I do now. It almost feels like it's not that was a real job, and what I do now is just sort of playing.
I can imagine. It's so where did you go to university?
First time round, I went to De Montfort University. That's where I studied.
Okay. Is that in Leicester?
Leicester, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, did 2 years there. And yeah, academically probably wasn't the best experience of my life, but socially it definitely was. I met, some of my best friends to this day. I met my wife. So I wouldn't change it at all. I learned a lot about the world, but not necessarily a lot about music technology. Or I learned I didn't probably want to do that as a career. That's what it taught me.
You kind of mentioned like the first time you went to university. So was there a second time?
Yeah. So once I'd hurt my back and kind of had that realization that I wanted to or needed to have a plan B, I decided to go into training. Well, again, kind of fell into it. So I was off sick in the ambulance service for a few weeks and came back on what they call light duties, which is basically office work.
Did you hurt your back on the job?
Yeah, lifting somebody badly, and something went pop, and I had to have a few weeks off. And in the process of recovery, I came back and did some office work, which involved training. We were introducing a new defibrillator across the service, and I got given the job of training all of the staff to use the defibrillator. Something I'd never done before, and I had to put together a PowerPoint presentation, which I never used PowerPoint before, never had to, enjoyed it immensely, and really enjoyed that kind of spreading knowledge and helping people to understand things, and decided then that's the path I want to go down. So I never actually went back on full road duties after that. I ended up going into an education department, which they was called commercial training, which is basically the ambulance service's way of teaching the public first aid and generating money as well, using the ambulance brand to teach first aid, to teach nurses how to do CPR, basic life support. And I basically got the opportunity to start in that department with somebody else who was in a similar position to me.
Yeah.
And we created this business within the ambulance service. And did really, really well. Sold lots of training.
So I'm just learning something here. So the NHS sells training to private individuals in private organisations?
Yeah, most ambulance services will have a commercial training department.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
And then we would also club together and kind of bid for national contracts. So back then we had Aldi, the supermarket. We would go and do their first aid training as part of this national agreement between the ambulance services.
So is that because the ambulance services don't get enough funding from the NHS, essentially?
It's one of the reasons, but it's also good for the ambulance service to teach the public. It kind of saves them. If people know how to deal with first aid incidents, then it stops them calling ambulances unnecessarily. And it's smaller scale, but it's a way for them to generate income, basically, with using their expertise. And you'd often get, there's lots of paramedics who have teaching qualifications, both for internal use, but, why not use that to generate income as well? That was the thinking. I've been out of it for a few years now, so I don't know how much they do now, but we certainly really tried to do a lot of training courses.
Mark, that's absolutely amazing. What did you find working in the ambulance service really rewarding?
Yes and no. Like I said earlier, it's not one of those. I didn't have to question whether I was doing good work, but a lot of the work the ambulance services does is wasted. We used to do 4 shifts in a row, so you do 2 days, 2 nights, and then you'd have 4 days off. And I would sometimes get to the end of that 4 shifts and think back and think, did I really need to go to any of those people? Were they an emergency case? And the vast majority just aren't. And I think these days it's even worse now with the people that struggle to get GP appointments, and the primary care services that aren't there for people, and the social care services that aren't there. I think the ambulance service kind of picks up a lot of the slack. So I used to miss it. I don't miss it so much now because it's almost unrecognisable to what it was 10 years ago.
I'd imagine it costs a lot more for an ambulance to deal with something rather than a GP to deal with it, doesn't it?
It does. But you kind of, once you've called 999 and you've made that decision, it's very difficult to then row back. I think they're getting better at it, and they triage a lot better than they used to. But we certainly used to go to a lot of things that we didn't really need to be there for. So it's just a state of the health service, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw an interesting article. I think it might have been on BBC News the other day, and it's like, since like your phones, like they've got this like holding the power button does an emergency call or something now, and like apparently like the emergency accidental calls have just gone up like 50% in the last year. So like a lot of the emergency response centres are getting swamped with people accidentally calling in, but then. The article was interesting because it was like these emergency response centres, or what are they called? Like the official term, who answers a 911 call?
Emergency Operations Centre.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. Or emergency operations centres. They're like, because people hang up straight away, it takes them 20 minutes to investigate every single like person that just called and hung up to make sure that they're actually okay. Whereas if you accidentally call the 999 and then you stay on the line and say, oh, oops, sorry, it saves them like all that time.
I think it was a software bug, because it happened to my wife actually while we were in the office, and her phone started alarming, and she'd, unbeknownst to her, accidentally called the emergency services, and they were calling her back to say what's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good that they go to that level, because
they do, but it takes a lot of time, and like you say, for a but they seem to know about it, but they have to check them all. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, so you went from the ambulance service, so you went back to university.
Oh yeah, so I was in the middle of that. So once I decided I was going to do this commercial training job. As part of the job, they funded me to go back to university and do a PGCE, Postgraduate Certificate of Education, so a teacher qualification, and specialising in post-compulsory education, so 16 plus. So that was really useful to be able to get the kind of educational background to firm up my knowledge with teaching.
Was that like a full-time qualification, or did you do it like as well as working?
I did it. Yeah, I did it alongside working. It took 2 years part-time.
Okay.
I think it was Central Bedfordshire College.
And then what did you do after that qualification? Did you continue working in the ambulance service for a bit?
Yeah, so I was there for a couple more years, and then they did. The NHS has a habit of restructuring constantly. And what they'd done in my ambulance service that I worked for, they'd actually brought in a commercial director. He'd come from Volkswagen, and fantastic boss, really, really good. Had all this great knowledge of kind of the private sector, which I never had from joining at 20. I only knew the NHS and how bureaucratic it was and how it worked. And he came in and he was a breath of fresh air, and could kind of see that I had the makings of or the ability to think in a kind of entrepreneurial way, but I was a bit restrained within the NHS because it's not designed for entrepreneurs. But he opened a lot of doors for me and gave me a lot of confidence to just get on with things. And he would say, ask for forgiveness rather than permission, because just trust your gut, because he knew I was right most of the time. So they did about a year I had under his leadership and really enjoyed it. And then they restructured, and a new person was in charge, and we got put under a different department, and they didn't quite get what we were trying to achieve. And it just kind of sucked the life out of it for me. So I was complaining. We were in the process of buying some equipment. I was complaining to the rep of the company, the medical equipment company that we were buying from, about all this, and she said, "Well, actually, we're weirdly, going to be recruiting in this area quite soon."
Okay.
And then, as luck would have it, I ended up getting that job that she was talking about.
Can you say which firm you went to work for?
Yeah. So it's a company called Laerdal Medical. They make the Resuscian dolls that everybody does. That does CPR training on. They were kind of the original inventors of that.
So they had like a patent for it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They were the first ones to make that, and now they make everything from that. That's kind of the baseline product, and they make kind of all singing, all dancing patient simulators, so robot humans that cost tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds that all the doctors and nurses practice on, and so I spent 5 years learning how to sell those.
What's the most advanced bit of like equipment that you just described, like the robot training aids? What does it do?
So it's called a Sim Man.
Okay.
That's the brand name, and it's basically a robot human patient. So you can stick needles in it and do CPR on it. You can give drugs to it, and it will breathe and blink and sweat and seize and all the things that a patient would do.
Okay. Does it have veins and stuff? Can you cut it open and operate inside it?
So there are some surgical simulators that do have, you can cut them open and do, cardiac massage and whatever that's called. There's a technical term for it. But you name the medical procedure, there'll be a simulator for it, just because it's so important not to practice on humans like we're used to.
Yeah, wow. It's a big money business, and I imagine.
It is. They seem quite expensive on the face of it. If you say a mannequin was £100,000, it sounds it's a lot of money. But if you're then not making one error that causes a patient to die or several patients to die, then it pays for itself several times over, because the litigation involved in itself, just saving that cost.
Well, the NHS spends billions a year, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, things like maternity. So if you have a pregnant mother and there's a problem with the baby and it comes down to clinical negligence, 50% of the NHS litigation budget is spent on maternity cases. And you have to look after that mother, financially, but you also have to look after that baby for the whole of its life. So it's tens of millions, usually the typical case that comes out. So to spend 50, 100,000 on a patient simulator and train all of your people really well so that those things don't happen, it makes sense.
So, Mark, how long did you work at that firm for?
I was there for 5 years.
Okay.
So I was the regional sales manager for the East of England. So I learned an awful lot about sales, really, because I'd never really done sales before and never considered myself as a salesperson, and probably spent most of my time in that job convincing people that I wasn't a salesperson. Which turns out to be quite a good sales tactic, because people will believe you.
Yeah, I guess. What was your sales tactic? Like, how did you get in front of people?
It wasn't hard to get in front of people because we were the market leader. So that I almost took for granted, and see certainly the difference now. Starting my own company where we have started from nothing. And there's no brand recognition there, so I don't have the benefit of that. But I never used to struggle to get into places. It was more the struggle was understanding the customers, because you've got such a huge portfolio of products, and you might be seeing pediatric intensive care one meeting, and then going to maternity, and then going to the emergency department, and having to have conversations with all these people and understand what their problems were. That was the biggest learning curve, I think. So having that medical background, opened doors that it wouldn't for other people. It's very, very difficult to con people into thinking about medicine. And you have, in a 10-year career in the ambulance service, I learned a lot of things that I completely take for granted just because it's knowledge in my head. So for anyone who's coming into sales and getting into healthcare sales without a medical background, it's really, really hard, I think.
Yeah, that's really good. Like you say, I think a lot of success I've noticed in industry is created when you take people from one particular background, give them a whole new skill set that then lets them interact with people from their old life. That's really good. So you were there for 5 years. What do they do well? Do you want to go into it? Like, what kind of things do they do well? What didn't you like so much?
Particularly something that I'm really thinking about now and appreciated less at the time, but it's culture, company culture. Their slogan was helping save lives, and they took it incredibly seriously, sometimes too seriously. It was my view then, but now when I think about it, I understand why they did that, how they had to be so explicit to actually trying to measure the impact of the company on how many lives that they're saving. And it's the target is millions now.
That must be really hard to link together.
It is, it is hard, but there's a sister charity called Laerdal Global Health, where they do take the number of people that they're training, and they would focus on infant mortality. So they would train 50 midwives, and then you could say, well, those midwives will probably save 3 babies in the course of a year, and then multiply it that way. So I would say they probably figured it out quite conservatively, but it was amazing to see the level of impact that you can have, and it certainly helped me daily to be able to think, well, the work that I'm doing and the money that I'm making selling these things is actually having a positive impact somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess that's probably one of the biggest objections people have to selling. There's in the back of their mind, they think they're inconveniencing someone by, getting in front of them. So I think if you, from a mindset point of view, if you can directly link the number of products you sell to the number of lives that are saved, then actually it's probably easy. It's probably a really good technique just to get over that barrier to, inconveniencing someone.
It can be. I'll never forget my first day in that company where they told me this story, and I'd obviously done my research and knew that this program existed. But the guy that was the managing director of the UK company, who was actually the grandson of the founder of the company, it's a Norwegian company, and this guy John was the managing director, and I remember him saying to me, "Do not use this story as a sales tool." And my jaw hit the table, and I was like, why wouldn't you? And I did a little bit, but you'd be surprised how many people, certainly within the NHS, who are dealing, with their own lives to save in front of them, would almost say, well, can we look after these people here rather than worrying about those people over there, because they're in their own crisis, if you like. So it wasn't something that we used all the time, but it was just nice to know that you're not just making money so a shareholder can buy another house and upgrade the swimming pool or whatever it was.
Yeah. Well, no, that's really good to know. And you were there for about 5 years, so you probably liked working there quite a bit. You're probably growing to a good level.
Yeah, pretty much like the ambulance service. Thought I would be there forever. I'm very much a all or nothing kind of person. While I'm there, I'll give it everything. I've not got one foot out the door. And I left because of what I think boils down to weak management. One person who I didn't think really belonged in the company, and they thought I didn't belong there, and they won. So yeah, I ended up leaving there and joining a smaller company within the industry, and that was also, really valuable tool. Yeah, really
how small was the company?
So they were probably, 5th, 6th down the pecking order.
Okay.
Much. We're talking probably 20 million turnover down to a less than $1 million turnover. Back then, that was 20. I'm not sure what year it was now. Just before COVID, 2019, 2018. And I just remember it because the goal was, get to $1 million turnover, that magic number that's in your people's heads. So yeah, that was a real, and they were slightly different. They weren't a manufacturer; they were a distributor. So I got a whole new set of skills to learn how to deal with suppliers and deal with be a different type of customer.
So did you have the same role in that other company?
No, well, sort of, but because it's smaller, I was doing more stuff. So my role was head of business development, but was essentially sales, but also marketing.
How come you ended up working with the suppliers? Is that because you'd get queries from the customers that you had to then resolve with the supplier?
No, their business model was distribution. So because they didn't manufacture anything themselves, they were representing one larger company within, and then they took on several more while I was there. But you're essentially got a group of 5, 6 suppliers, and then you sell all of their products. But you have to then deal with both ends of the relationship.
Yeah. So if a customer had a problem with the product, you'd have to pick it up with the supplier essentially,
yeah, but you'd also have to negotiate buying the products from the suppliers.
Okay.
So
to get the best price and
so that's basically what we do now. We're a distributor.
Yeah.
And we represent think about 15 different companies in the UK, and we help them to crack the UK market. That's what they come to us for.
Amazing. Okay. And what was that smaller company that you went to work for called?
Called Simulades.
Simulades, okay. And how long were you there for?
I was there for just under 2 years. I always see the opportunity, almost to my detriment at the moment, and that's only something I'm realising fairly recently, to be honest. But I used to say all the time, I just want an easy life. And I said it just a couple of weeks ago to a friend of mine, and she said, "What are you talking about? Like that's not your personality at all. Like you are constantly finding the most difficult way and challenging way to do something, and then trying to do it differently again." And when she said it, it just keeps on playing in my head over and over. And she's completely right. That is what I've done. I started this business with the mindset, I'll just drop ship every box. I won't ever touch a box. It's the modern way. I'll just build a website. It will make sales. I'll use my connections. It'll be easy. And that is how we started. And now we ship 99% of the boxes that go out. We handle them ourselves. And we've just had to open a warehouse to do that. And that's just because it's not scalable, and you can't, the quality of service that you get from other suppliers wasn't what I was happy with. So I said the only way that we can guarantee that we can get the quality is to do it ourselves.
I was watching the Road to Success podcast the other day, and I think there's a company called Yinomize. They do car wrapping, and one of the owners, Bav, and the main guy, they were having a conversation, and they were trying to figure out, do people that drop ship, are they actually entrepreneurs? And I think the conclusion they came to was no, because like drop shipping is just like a way of setting up a business without taking any risk. But then the gains in drop shipping are always really, really limited anyway.
It depends what you're drop shipping. So in my industry, it's actually, I think, the best place to be if you're as a distributor, because the risk is relatively little, because I can... we're fortunate now in that we have manufacturers come to us. So when I started, I was very reliant on the relationships that I had and the people that I knew to be able to say, started a new company. Yeah. Will you take a risk and let me represent you in the market? And some of them, there's always two different types of company, I find. There's ones that will just say yes to every distributor, and they just want as many products as they can out there. And there's others that are very picky and they only want to work with good people. And I have a mix, I would say. And I now, because I can choose, I now gravitate towards the one that are a bit more choosy, because we get exclusivity, but they're also a bit more discerning. So they set the bar a bit higher.
What proportion of your stuff do you drop ship at the moment?
1% compared to 99%.
I guess that's... but there's much better margins than just holding your own stock, isn't there?
Not necessarily. It depends. I would say it's probably actually fixed. It's not usually if I buy 100 of this thing, am I going to get the same, better price than if I buy one of this thing? That's kind of rare in this industry. I don't know why. We might try and change that, but for me, it was the level of service. If you're running an e-com, and that was the other thing that changed for me, is I just thought I'll do e-commerce. I learned during COVID, I learned how to build websites. And for when I was working for Simulators, they had to redesign the whole website. So I kind of, while I was working there, learned everything to do. And then when I built my own, I just did it all a second time, but a bit better because I had more experience. And it interests me. I enjoy designing the website and thinking about the kind of customer journey through the website and all the little tweaks you can make to optimize web pages. That floats my boat. But I thought at the beginning, I'll just be e-commerce, just be a website. There'll be no sales involved. People will just click the button, add to basket, and then I just tell someone else to send them the box. What could be easier? But it's difficult. When you have an e-commerce customer, the Amazon model has kind of, I'm not going to say ruined. It's forced everyone to up their game. If you order something online and it hasn't arrived the next day, you're wondering, where is it? In my industry, certainly during COVID, the lead times were 6 to 8 weeks minimum.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a very unusual experience for somebody to order something online and then get an email to say it's going to be with you in 2 months' time. So I had to kind of rethink that and rethink the messaging and make sure people weren't caught off guard when that happens. And now, all of our products, you can see whether they're available in stock or not. And actually, we've moved now. Online customers are probably 10%. I haven't looked at the numbers this month, but probably 10% of our business is online. 90% is offline purchase orders from NHS and universities, who we have a better relationship with. There's more a consultative sale, and we can explain the lead times to them, and they're a bit more used to it and understanding. So again, a complete shift in what I thought this business was going to be.
So you just mentioned you built your own website. Like, how do you do that? Was that in WordPress, or like did you use like Wix? Or?
So this time around, I used Shopify.
Okay.
Just because they're the biggest. It was easy, and I knew it would work out of the box.
Do you still use Shopify?
Yeah, still use Shopify. And we could probably switch to a different platform and make a few more pounds on each sale. But in the 2.5 years I've been running it, it's never gone down. If I need support, it's always there. And, it's a big company and they do their job really well. So, I definitely recommend them. But similarly, I've used WordPress and could build a WordPress site if I wanted to. But then you almost, one of the things that I find, it sounds like a negative, but I see it as a positive, is there's so many choices you can make with a WordPress site. You could do absolutely anything. Yeah. Whereas sometimes it's nice to be a little bit constrained because you're forced to just make a decision quickly and go with it. And I welcome that these days with so many decisions to make.
What did the first 6 weeks of you being like running your own business look like?
Oh, wow. First 6 weeks. Scary. That's the honest truth. I remember my first sale.
Did you save up money before you left your old place, or?
I had $5,000.
I had 5.5 when I started. I was awful at saving.
Yeah, I had $5,000, and I was thinking about it on the way here. Like, how did I actually decide? There wasn't a kind of, definite moment where I said I'm going to do my own business. Even up until the day it started, I was still interviewing. So I'd left Simulades, and in that period between leaving and starting, I interviewed for 2 positions that I quite fancied. One was a global head of sales for a company within our industry, and another one was a VR company who were just trying to break into it. And quite like the idea of the challenge of both of them. But I think back to those interviews, and I interviewed badly, which is not like me. I'm usually quite good at interviews, I like to think. I've been offered a few jobs over the years. And I think I did it deliberately. I think I sabotaged myself because I knew I really wanted to do this business. But I like to have a plan B always. So I think I was having that plan B there, but I was almost dreading them offering me the job because they'd have to make a decision then. Whereas if I kind of made them not want me, then I'd be forced into it. And that's what I'd always said all along, is that I've quite fancy starting my own business, but something drastic will have to happen. And COVID was that thing that made it happen.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, that makes sense. So you started out, I take it you worked some kind of notice period, finished that.
Yeah, they were really good. So because I was going to be setting up as a distributor, we kind of had an extended period. Okay. And in the last month, they kind of said, as long as you're doing what you're doing for us, you can set your website up and do what you need to do for that. And I remember my first sale was actually, so it was so Simulates closed for the year on Christmas Eve. So there was no more business to be done there. They couldn't process the order. And somebody phoned me on Christmas Eve and said, I need to place an order before the end of the year and I need to be invoiced. And I knew that couldn't happen at Simulates. So I took them over and in my new company, and I knew that Simulates are still going to get the sale, but just not until January. And that was my first one, and that, I think it was probably the first one I did in that month, I would say. I can't be sure because I can't remember. I probably blanked it out, but I remember that fear of where is the next one coming from, because that $5,000 would probably have lasted us 2 months.
But that was your commission on that first sale.
No. So that was that $5,000 I had in my savings.
Oh yeah, okay, got it.
That was no. Was it? No, that $5,000 would have lasted us 6 months. That's what I worked out. If we actually cut down everything, plus my wife's salary, she was working in a nursery at the time. We can last. I basically said I've got 6 months to make this business pay. And if it doesn't, then I'll get a job.
So I guess that was your plan F, but
So I did that, and I remember that first sale. The rest is a bit of a blur, just because it feels so long ago now, even though it was only 2.5 years ago.
You know what? It took me 6 months just to get my first customer.
Yeah,
sales weren't my strong point. But so you managed to get something right off the bat, but that was kind of linked to your old place where you worked. So what was like the first sort of independent sale that you made?
I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at the records, but it was probably something on the website.
Is that so? Were you doing like SEO stuff on the website, or how did you get people to the website?
So I was trying to look. Google Ads, I would say, was probably the biggest driver of website sales, and still is, I would think.
Did you outsource that at the beginning, or did you just run it yourself?
I couldn't afford to, so I had to. Yeah. I did the Google courses that you can do, which are free. They just take time. So I did that, and I taught myself as best as I could. But I still don't really understand it, and I don't think there are many people that are. The Google algorithm is a law unto itself, and then it changes. And there's all I've dealt with enough PPC, pay-per-click companies now who claim to be on top of it, who once you get their services, you realise they're really not. And it's a bit of a minefield, but I tried to learn it as best as I could, and it was working. We were making money, but that was also in the Bitcoin days, and I was on the side. I was trying to learn all I could about Bitcoin, and I would say the first 6 months of the business, my salary was paid for by Bitcoin investment rather than my own sales, and then that the bottom fell out of that, as things do. But if it hadn't been there, then I probably would have struggled.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely amazing. So, well, you know what? When I first started this business, I built my own website, but I built it in Wix, and then eventually I had like a web design agency, then built it in WordPress. But I think, when you're on that shoestring, it really forces you to be resourceful and learn a lot of things yourself. But you know what? I kind of think starting a business with like not much money actually stood me in really good stead for where I am now, because like I see so many business owners where they get some sort of funding behind them, or they've got quite a lot in savings or some sort of inheritance, and then they go out and they try and start that business. And because they weren't forced to do everything themselves, then when they actually do start dealing with certain agencies and certain other professionals that they outsource to, they're not actually in the best place to work out if they're getting value for the money or if they're talking to the right people. So like,
and what's worth paying for? I know my limitations on most things now, and I will try. And now it's different. I'm so busy. I pay to get the time back. So there's a different value placed on it. But at the beginning, I was paying for results, because I know what I can get out of Google Ads, and I would set that benchmark, and then I'd say to the professional agency, and this happened, the first agency I used, they didn't do as well as I did. I was like, well, how can that be? How can this be your job and you didn't perform well as I did?
Did they make any excuses, or?
No, they just let me leave my contract early. Okay. And that kind of told me all I needed to be told. So it's one of those things you need to know. Yeah, you need to know enough to be able to know what you need to pay for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, are you still heavily invested in Google pay-per-click these days? Do you still do a lot of it?
We do, about $2,500 a month, I would say.
But you're also like, well, I guess that leads us on to the next part of the conversation anyway. But then recently your wife, Nicola, left her teaching job, didn't she? And then started working with you, alongside you.
Yes. So Nicola was the first employee that I brought into the business, and her role was marketing director, because that was the bit that I was struggling to do, was marketing. And that's what I could see, certainly within our industry, and probably in most industries, marketing is not done well. And you don't have to be that good to be a lot better than everybody else. So that's what I saw as being our strength.
I guess, so the marketing side of it, is that mainly to encourage people to buy more often from you? So you're meeting new people through pay-per-click, then you're trying to build that long-term relationship with them, so you get that repeat business.
It was just to let them know that we exist.
Okay.
That was it. Because we were selling by that point, so that was February, I think, in my second year. So I did the first year on my own, and then in February of the second year, I brought Nicola in, and it was just trying to spread the name and spread the bit of brand awareness that we were here. And by that point, we'd had quite a lot of, we were selling some well-known brands, but we were the strategy was be the cheapest. That was all we had. Our overheads are low. We can be cheaper than anybody. So that was the strategy at the beginning. That's why I ended up investing in marketing first, because I didn't have the time to do it and was trying to set myself targets of, do one blog post a month, and 6 months would go by and I've not done any. And that was good because that meant I was busy selling. But at the same time, I knew that wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, and in terms of like AdWords, I guess I'm kind of stuck on it at the moment. But why not just quadruple your AdWords budget, for example? Is it because you hit a point of diminishing returns, or?
I didn't know. Nobody could prove to me that it was worth it, and I'm having the same problem now with the PPC company we use now. Is I have to say to me, show me something that demonstrates return on investment. I pay Google $2,500. Where's it going? And it seems to be a hard thing for people to demonstrate, and I don't really understand why, because there's a lot of analytics in there that can tell you where the money's going.
Because you can follow a customer's journey, really, can't you, through your website?
Apparently, yeah. And this is all the stuff that I need to get to grips with, and we're now going back. We're kind of having a big change within the company to bring in more people, and they're just starting now. So Nicola's role, which started as marketing, then went quickly changed from marketing to actually managing the warehouse. And I call it a warehouse, but it was at the beginning one self-storage unit, which turned into 4 self-storage units. Okay. And it was only last week that we actually closed that and opened an actual warehouse with offices above. To do it properly, if you like. Yeah.
I mean, I completely agree with that approach, like in terms of the marketing, because obviously we invest a lot in marketing as well. And when I started out, we built that website, and then I started instead of for me, I couldn't afford to get SEO support at the beginning. So I started learning all this stuff about SEO, and this was, our business is almost 10 years old now. So about 9 years ago, this is when I was doing all that black hat stuff. So I had I remember I had my laptop open all night, and there was just this bit of software on there that was building dodgy links. And then I got another bit of software that was just writing really bad articles by spinning words. And you know what? Probably when I was about a year into my business, this would have been early 2015, we started moving up the rankings in Google for accountants Northampton. And I checked it properly. I'd use things like Moz or Majestic SEO, and we started moving up just with those really bad backlinks and really bad articles. And then that got us our first sort of batch of clients. I mean, we did some telemarketing at the beginning anyway, but it got, before Google was wise to all that stuff, and then obviously started penalizing us for it. But at that point, we'd started getting enough work coming in that I could actually afford to get an SEO agency to go and do it properly. And it's, so it's things that you do at the very beginning. But yeah, we've done our whole share of Google pay-per-click stuff, and it's worked in the past for us. But then but we don't, that's interesting, right? Because you'd talk to a new customer who'd come in and you'd say, "Hey, where'd you hear about us?" And they'd say, "Oh, we found you on Google." And then unless you want to really dive into it, you don't know if they found you on the Google local listing. You don't know if they found you on the Google organic listing, or if they saw you in the pay-per-click section. So
and then you get to what did you search?
Exactly.
I was obsessed with it at the beginning, just like you, because I had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with it. And I've not thought about it for probably 18 months. And now I'm going to get back into it, not quite in the same way, but try and go back and say, well, we've got a website that's been running for 2.5 years. we need to now use all of that data that we've been measuring and work out what's the next step. How do we optimize that site? Where are we losing people? Things like abandoned shopping carts, we get 3 or 4 of them a day now. Why are they doing that? Whereas when you're busy in it, you don't have time to think about that.
That was Google was my obsession till about 2 years ago. So I would be like, up till about 2 years ago, like every day of my business, pretty much, I would just search our ranking, like for accountants, Northampton. And then like eventually, like about 2 years ago, I just pulled the plug on all of our SEO, all of our pay-per-click stuff. Cause you found us on LinkedIn, really, didn't you? And
I think so. Yeah. Originally.
And we changed our business model a lot 2 years ago. Like, before we were more of a traditional accounting firm, but then a lot of the stuff coming in through Google would be very price sensitive, and they just wanted a quote for something so they could compare it to another quote. And, when we changed our business model to more like financial management and business advisory, we realized Google wasn't going to guess the kind of clients that we wanted to work with. Although there's clients which we met through Google who turned into clients on our advisory element. But the vast majority of clients that came through Google, they weren't appropriate for the advisory program that we had. But we, to grow the other kinds of marketing that we needed to grow to really build that credibility to get clients on it, I realized I was going to have to get the budget from somewhere. And turning Google off, I mean, it didn't happen overnight, but turning the SEO off, turning our pay-per-click off, it was like one of the hardest decisions I had to make in business.
Yeah, because you don't know what negative effect it's going to have, but actually most of it is just time. If you're doing a good job and you're, I remember I don't remember exactly how I found you, but I remember knowing that a video came up, one of your little clips that you do where you're talking to camera and you were answering a question that I was considering at that time. And that if you're doing the same thing in any business, in any website, if people are thinking of that thing and you provide that answer, then they're going to stick with you. And a lot of it's just good luck and timing and being in the right place at the right time. But that's what we focus our content on, is or will do it as we build our strategy and film more stuff and do more stuff like this, is what are people asking? What problems do they have? How can we solve them? And demonstrate that we're the experts in that field.
Most people aren't doing that.
No, they're not.
And also, we were talking about the new LinkedIn algorithm changes that are coming in. But after I gave up being obsessed with our Google ranking, I became obsessed with the number of LinkedIn connections we had. I'd look at that every day and it's like, hey, that's grown. And then more recently, I've kind of got bored of that, and now my new obsession is our YouTube subscribers. So I look at that twice a day, and it's if the second we get a subscriber, the girls in the marketing team know about it. It's I'm like, hey, we just got a new subscriber. But you've always got to have some in business, it can really be hard to understand if you're making progress a lot of the time. You can always look at the finances, but then a lot of the finances involve all the investment you made in the growth, so they don't always tell you. They don't always have a linear picture of your progress, but you're always trying to find little numbers you can hang on to. What's your obsession at the moment?
I'm a bit too busy to have obsessions at the moment. My obsession is having a holiday. I think that's what we're working towards, because it's been, the last few weeks, it's been quite a transition. So we've gone, and it's because it's the end of June, and our financial year runs January. So I'm thinking in halves and where we were a year ago. 12 months ago today, it was just me and Nicola. And as of next week, there'll be 8 of us, including me. So that's my whole world has changed completely, and my whims and obsessions kind of have to take a back seat because I've now got 7 employees to think about and make sure they're happy every day. And it's my day is just phone calls now. It's very different to what it was before when I was just dealing with customers and doing every part of that process. So that's been a real challenge.
So what does your team look like at the moment? What are the roles you've got in it?
I'll do it in order. It's probably the easiest thing. So Nicola was first. That was marketing. And then we had Steph come in, and she was customer service to start with. But because it's a small business, you kind of have to wear many hats. So it's customer service, it's technical support, and pretty much any job that I needed her to do. But marketing stuff, she was writing blog posts and anything that she had expertise on, we were using. And then we brought in a sales consultant called Marie, and she was somebody that was worked for a competitor in our industry before, so she was kind of ready to go, and I could just let her get on with it. But for me, being a salesperson and knowing how you need to have that funnel filled all the time, that was my next. How do I commit less of myself to the sales process? And so that was bringing her in. Was the way to do that. And then we brought in another customer service person, Chloe, who's also got quite a broad business administration background. So she's also taken over the finance side, dealing with the bills and invoices and all the stuff that I was doing. And then now coming in, we have somebody in the warehouse who's, packing the boxes and looking after all the inventory and that sort of thing. And then an operations director. So they're going to run that office and that warehouse, and then a sales director as well, because again, I'm obsessed with, that's my obsession, filling the funnel, keeping more sales coming through and paying for all these people that we've got now.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, although you've done amazingly well in the last 2 years just by yourself. I mean, as in you being the head of the company by yourself, though.
Yeah, it's been a lot of people have been surprised when I tell them, and it's, you kind of play a bit of a game when you're one person or two people. You kind of have to make it sound bigger than it is. And so I'll have, if you phone our phone number, you'll then be asked what options. Do you want to speak to the sales team? Do you want to speak about an order? Or do you want to speak to finance or whatever it is? They all come to my phone. So you kind of having to think, how am I answering the phone in a way that doesn't make it obvious that it's all just me? So yeah, it's we're kind of past playing that game now. I actually have departments to manage, and that in itself is quite difficult because everybody's used to doing everything. So now to say to them, right, you can't do that anymore. You have to pass that to that person because of that's the process. So that's the kind of pain that we're going through at the moment.
So you're trying to create some sort of hierarchy in the business where everyone doesn't just report into you, really?
Yeah, I'm trying to replace myself. That's been, I've gone from wanting to start a business so that I don't have to rely on anybody else to actually realizing that if everything relies on me, there's no slack. And I did in January this year, I burnt out completely. I was absolutely exhausted to the point where I was just said to Nicola, let's just put the business on eBay and get rid of it because I don't know that it's worth it. And I'm glad I didn't do that. But I was at that point where it's just, why am I doing this? It's not making me happy anymore. And that was the point where I decided to get more partners in. And I actually sold half the business, or I'm in the process of selling half the business to be able to bring in those people. Because I thought, what is the point of owning? And lots of people have said to me, you're mad. Don't get rid of half of it. You need to own everything, and profit. And I said, well, what's the point if it's making me unhappy? Why? And plus, I can't grow it to the size that it needs to grow to. I spent a lot of time and took advice from people who just say, keep it small, just pay for yourself, pay for your wife. You can have a comfortable life. But it was becoming harder to keep it small than it would be to just let it grow organically.
Well, the size of the business, in terms of what I've noticed over the years, is, and I'm not just talking about your business in general, the size of the business is not proportional to the work. Sorry, the amount of work is not directly linked to the size of the business. Like, it's the fact that you're wearing so many hats. Like, you could have like 3 customers, but if you're doing a little bit of everything, it's just having to jump between all those different jobs. Like, that's where I think the exhaustion comes in. Like, but for me, I definitely understand that because like I've been through that in the past. And then after a while, like, we decided to like have departments and teams and a structure where people report into each other. Because in the end of the day, our business, it is based to some level on common sense. So like, if someone's good at something and someone needs help with that thing, they will go to that person, regardless of, the actual formal structure of our business. But I think the way I look at it is we have our technical hierarchy and we have our administrative hierarchy. So like administrative hierarchy is if someone's got to have a doctor's appointment, they need to adjust their hours, or if someone's got to take some holiday or some time off, that's the administrative hierarchy. Who signs that off? I don't want to be signing every little thing like that off. it's just not efficient for me. So we have a structure there for that. But then our technical hierarchy is like, we also split the business into different like technical areas. Like for an accounting firm, it's easy to do it on tax. Mm-hmm. And then like, we have one main person that's responsible for that type of tax. And then they utilize other people in the business to help them get that tax all done. So that's kind of where I came up with that awareness of like, the the administrational and the technical side of it. But it's, for me, we've just been on a bit of a journey for me to try and step back a bit. Like, so I think in terms of marketing, like, I probably annoyed Ellie quite a lot yesterday because I was just trying to change things around in terms of our posting, and it is hard to step away from jobs you've had in the past. Like,
it's the hardest thing in the world because what I've learned from working with other people is that not everybody has the same standard or the same way of doing things, and I've had to accept that just because somebody does something differently doesn't mean that it's worse.
No, you're right.
And often it's the opposite because it's grown. I mean, so the growth that we've had from year 1 to year 2, we grew 600%. And then the 6 months just gone, we've grown another 100%.
Amazing.
And so you can't do things the same way that you did even 6 months ago because you're doing it twice as much now. So that's been one of the things that's been a real eye-opener for me. And I actually find it easier just to stay out of the meetings. Yeah. And just let the people who are doing that thing get on with it, and they'll find the best way to do something. And it's very rare that I'll actually say, I've done that, and we need, that's not how to do it. But I always have to let people fail on their own. Sometimes you just have to learn the hard way, like I did the first time round. They'll learn and they'll remember it then the next time.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really screwing me up at the moment is just trying to understand the difference between delegation and abdication. So, I mean, I do understand the difference, but I mean, delegation is when you transfer tasks to someone, but you don't transfer the responsibility. Okay. Obviously, they are accountable, but abdication is just like, hey, you get on with it, and then you don't care what happens.
Or you care what happens, but it happened just today.
Well, you don't provide any oversight, right?
Yeah, but you have to trust people to do their job, and I don't want people to be coming to me and asking every single little thing, and it's happening a lot now, and it will happen less over time because of just where we are and bringing in new people. They've got lots of questions, and they don't want to. Everyone's very conscious that I started the company from nothing and it's my baby, but I don't want to be this overbearing person saying it's my baby. I started it from nothing, every day. So it's really tricky, and there's no blueprint for it. You just have to check yourself every a bit of self-awareness. And I have a coach that I go to who's kind of been through that process of leading massive teams, and I can go to him and say, what's your advice on this sort of thing? Or I'm going through this, and he very rarely tells me what to do. He'll help me work out for myself what I need to do. And sometimes you just need to reflect. I mean,
I don't know if easy is the right word, but your team's kind of spread out over the country, isn't it? Like it's less localized. So does that make it
completely remote? And that again, another.
Does it make it easier to like let go a bit? Because if you literally aren't there overhearing things, seeing them work.
I mean, I don't know any different. So obviously I've worked in workplaces, and every single one of them, even in the companies that I enjoyed working for, that office in the main was miserable. Just people felt like they were forced to be there. It's a sterile environment, and it just. I don't think that was the best way to get out of people, the best performance. But because I was sales and road based, I go to the office and it's a treat for me. It's nice. I get to see people that I only speak to on the phone and get to have a chat. Yeah. And then you get that back from them. They're happy that you're there because it's a bit of a change. So I never wanted to just have, I never wanted to have an office, full stop. I fought against it for 2 years. So we're not
you've got premises now, which kind of are an office.
With an office, exactly like every other office in the country. They look the same.
But you don't make people turn up there I guess.
Not at the moment. I mean, so the people that run the warehouse have to be there because the deliveries have to come in and out. And so that's my next big project is the culture of the company and the culture of that workplace. And I won't be there that often. So how do we make it in a way that I would want to be there every day? Because I never want to say to people, "You got to be there every day and make the best of it."
Have you written your culture up yet?
Not yet. So it's on. We're having a meeting, the first big company meeting where everybody goes there, and that's one of the things that we're going to do on that day is discuss and work out what the company culture is. And I'm still, we've talked about it a lot, but I'm not too concerned about. We will write it down, but I'm not too concerned about writing it down because I've been, see enough examples of places where they write it down, but they don't actually do it and live it. And I think, and I hope that I'm a good example and I'm actually living it. And what I do and say is really what the company culture is. And we're small enough still that people will feed off that and mirror that. And as long as I'm conscious of what I do and say, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, we've had an interesting journey with the culture of our business. Like initially, we came up with the culture and it had like 9 points, 9 points of culture, and then we like added another 3, and then it was our 12 points of culture. And it was all documented. It was on a website, and I was like, "Hang on, can anyone remember this?" And then like last week, me and Becky, we just sat down and said, "Okay, well, those 5 things are essentially the same thing. It's leadership." So then we managed to get our 12 points of culture down to 7, which are now rememberable.
Right. And
then now what we've got to do is really come up with some stories that have happened in the business that showcase that culture. We just got to document it. We've got to adjust our website for it. I am a believer in writing down that culture because it's almost like a rule book, like in my opinion, people in the business, they've got to be able to go somewhere and just see that documented, I think.
Sometimes I'm not very good with rules. So because I remember, and I take most of my guidance from Lairdale, from having that still, it's a feeling. I feel that culture even today. I feel it. And they had the 5 guiding stars. I could not tell you what they are. I don't know what they are, but for me, it's a feeling. And that's what I'm hoping to recreate is just, you don't have to be quite so prescriptive with behavior, but you've got the right attitude.
How are you finding working with your wife? I know a handful of businesses where husbands and wives work together. What do you do to keep it, leave it in the office once you finish with the day?
To be honest, she's worse than me for wanting to talk about. Sometimes I just say, it's 8 o'clock. I'm not talking about it because it's work. But at the beginning it was tough, but it was almost necessity. So that she was working in a nursery for minimum wage, and she's a teacher by profession and background, and she loved the work, but it was so difficult and it was so consuming. She was up till 11 o'clock marking and doing work, and that's why she left the school and went to the nursery, because we thought, well, at least you could just go and do your hours. But it's an outdoor nursery. You're working in the winter. It's grueling work. And I was looking at what I was doing and got to the point where I really needed help. And I just said, I would rather you work with me. Originally we started, she was doing 9 till 3. So as soon as the kids need to get picked up from school, she's off with them and spending much more quality time with them. And it all worked, quite well. But the challenge was that she didn't feel she was coming into my business. That's how it felt at the time. And that's how it was in reality. I built this thing. She was then becoming a part of it, but I was having to dictate what to do. And now, 2 years later, it's completely changed. She's established herself as, she knows far more about marketing than I ever will, because she's applied herself and trained herself. And
do you view her as a partner or an employee?
A partner, absolutely a partner. And she has the equal shareholding that I have. And yeah, at the beginning it was employee and you're coming into my business, but that's changed over time.
So she did something with the marketing to earn your respect. essentially, and
no.
as a partner.
She's always had my respect, and I have always thought she's brilliant. That's why I married her.
And that's probably not the right way to phrase it on my behalf.
But professionally, she started having confidence in herself. That was the difference. You know, lots of people have this imposter syndrome, and she says that that's what she felt like. Whereas I don't really suffer with that, thankfully. But it's taken a while for her to actually see that, you know, and we, especially comparing yourself to what, you know, the type of marketing that other global companies in our industry, billion-dollar companies, what they'll put out, and you think it's not very good.
Yeah, you're telling me like some of your competitors are stealing your descriptions and stealing some of your content.
It's happened. I mean, I'm just flattered by it, to be honest with you. A lot of them are trying to steal we have when you talk about your signature solution in the Apex program, we have a kind of process that we use, which is to basically provide resources to customers to prove that we are the authority. And we have a particular type of customer who will be looking for a particular type of or group of products. We put those in a product guide, and then just by dint of us providing that resource, that sets us up to be able to sell those things to that customer. And we get our competitors signing up for that thing and going through that funnel, and I just laugh, because they don't even try to copy us, because they can't be bothered, or I don't know how, I don't know what the reason is, but we're not hiding our process. You know, we want people to know what we're up to.
You know what? It's barriers to entry, really, isn't it? You might have just been through so much pain to generate one thing that competitors look at it as unachievable for them. And
yeah, maybe, but we've also positioned ourselves that we are a kind of one-stop shop for that, certainly that particular type of customer. Everything that you would need to set up for that course, we have it. Whereas the others aren't doing that.
You know, I've got a couple of questions about that, but before we move on, you mentioned an outdoor nursery. What is? I've never heard of this.
Oh right, so it's not far away from here actually. I can't remember the name of it now.
Does that mean but it's quite a common children thing outdoors?
In cages. No, not in cages. It's always outdoors. Have you ever heard of forest schools?
Yeah, my daughter goes to forest school.
Yeah, so they'll often do sessions of forest school, and they go out in the woods and they learn about nature and they start fires and stuff. It's basically that, but all day, every day.
Oh wow!
They're just outside, but and they will. You know, obviously, if it's snowing, then they go undercover.
They've got like a shelter.
90% of the time, they're outside, and it's it's proven to work in Scandinavia, and you'll have to get Nicola on to talk,
I think
to talk about that. Got
a lot of follow-up questions on that, but
it's really growing in popularity over here because it's quite beneficial to the kids.
Yeah. So at the moment, you've mentioned that actually a lot of your sales are based on your expert knowledge of these products. How are you disseminating that expert knowledge amongst your team? Have you got like an internal resource which they can access to gain that?
No, but that we're planning to build one. So this new office and warehouse that we've moved into actually used to be a radio station, and it has a ready-made studio in there. So we're going to kit that out as a clinical area and a training space, and we're going to do staff training, but we're also going to do customer demos. So if somebody says, I want to buy an IV arm, for example, I don't know which one to go for. Well, we can look on the shelf. We've got these 3 in stock. Give us 10 minutes. All the cameras are set up. We just dial into a Zoom call. We can show them that products, there and then, and they can ask the questions they need to ask. And
then that can go on your website, and it's like evergreen content, essentially.
Yeah, it can be content. It's just solving that problem then that, something that no other companies are doing.
Yeah, that's really good. It's, have you invested in all the camera setup and everything?
Not yet. So it's on the list. Yes. But that's what COVID taught me. I used to work in a company where you had, as a salesperson, you had to go and do 12 customer visits a week, come what may. And that was the only thing they measured, was how many customer visits have you done. They never asked about the quality of those visits. And it used to drive me mad. And I got to know the people at Kettering General incredibly well, because when I was a couple of visits short of a week, I would go in there, buy them coffee, and That's two more people I've seen. And I used to play the game, but it used to drive me out the wall because it was complete nonsense. You did not need to do that set number. And even when I'd ask, how did you come up with that number? No one could tell me. It was just a number
that's the wrong KPI, really, wasn't it?
Been plucked out of the air. But we've started doing that on 1 year, and then we've had a good year, so we'll just keep doing that. I guess that's how they come up with it. But COVID was kind of the proof that I always said I could sell more being sat at home in my office than I can be being sat in the car for 6 hours a day driving and not actually selling. And COVID proved me right because, but it took that because the NHS wasn't set up before to accept online video calls as a matter of routine, and they are now. But it seems to me almost every other company in our industry has gone back to that selling in person, be out on the road all day, and gone back to the old model how they used to do it. And we've gone the other way. We do 99% of it is online. Most people can make a buying decision without having to actually see the product. And when they do, we either send it to them and do a video call alongside them, so we haven't got to go anywhere, or we will go and visit them, if there's a need to. But we know that when we go out, we're walking away with a sale, because otherwise we're just wasting time and wasting money.
So who are your customers at the moment? What kind of people?
So we deal with universities. It's probably the biggest one.
Is that the medical schools? Or?
Yes, medical schools, nursing schools, physiotherapy schools. There's a whole load of people that we go and see. Paramedic schools, obviously. Further education colleges we deal with a lot. And then NHS trusts. They're probably the three biggest types of customer that we have. But we also have a lot of small independent training companies, one-man bands who are just buying CPR mannequins or lungs or whatever they might need. There are kind of website customers, and they're the ones that expect that next day service that I was talking about, because they've got a training course on Friday, so they order it on Tuesday.
Yeah,
you need to be quick for them.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess in terms of you mentioned you were supporting some kind of training as well in the past. Like you mentioned T levels. I remember. What are T levels at the moment? So
T levels essentially is a replacement for the BTEC of old, and it's a new qualification. And for me, it's perfect. They are where the hospitals and universities were 20 years ago, setting up what we call simulation centres. So you have basically a mock ward. And you'll have a hospital bed. You might have some screens with some one-way mirrors on, so that you can have the facilitator behind and the student, and there's a barrier. You'll have a hospital bed. You'll have a mannequin. You'll have various task trainers for IV catheterization. But these guys are kind of 16 to 18-year-olds. So it's basic. It's taking pulses. It's taking blood pressures. It's talking to patients. It's one of the things that we're building at the moment, or kind of repurposing, is an AI patient simulator. So you're talking to a screen or in a VR headset to an avatar, and you have a conversation with that avatar, and it uses artificial intelligence and speech recognition to have a conversation back with you in real time.
Wow. Okay.
So that's just getting these students used to asking, what's your name? Why are you here today? All the social information they need, all the background, medical history, all that stuff can be done with AI and VR really easily. And
is the value you're adding in that situation really like the fact that you understand the qualifications, so you can give them the equipment list?
Yeah, so it's quite a new qualification, and they come up with an equipment list. And the first number one problem that we had to solve was, how do we match the training products that we provide with the curriculum? So we produced this product guide which did all of that. So if you need to teach, hand washing, then we have a hand hygiene trainer kit which uses UV light and special liquid that you put on your hands and shows you how well you're using your hands. And it actually is one of the most popular things we sell.
Is that like disclosing tablets when you're teaching a kid how to brush their teeth?
Exactly that, but for your hands.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most popular products that we have, and it's one of the most popular things to teach, because when we go out and do if we do trade shows or we go and visit customers, we take one of those, and the students will queue up just to see how well they've washed their hands. which, it sounds really basic, but it's fun. And if you can inject some fun into it, they'll remember it. And every time they wash their hands, they're going to be thinking of that, and they'll do it properly.
Okay, amazing. And how many different curriculums are there in the T levels that you're dealing with at the moment?
Well, it's one curriculum, but it's massive number of different points that we have to meet. So, I'm actually not the expert on that particular thing, but we have this guide that we built, and that's what people get from us, is that we can just say, buy this list of things, and then you'll be able to teach this list of things, which we thought was it solves part of the problem. What we've learned from selling this list of things to probably 80 plus customers now, 80 colleges, is that actually the next question is, how do you do that? How do you take that mannequin that you've spent £20,000 on and use it not once a year to do an assessment, but every single day to teach every little part of that curriculum? So that's what we're doing next. You're
creating the teacher notes.
We're going to create a faculty development program to give these teachers the ability to implement simulation into their everyday teaching.
Okay. If you don't mind me saying, that doesn't sound like the job of the supplier, though, of the equipment. Like, I thought isn't there like an official body that would just regulate that course?
Yeah, there is. And they are trying to do that, but they have, we met with them, we had this exact conversation. They have 2 people for the whole country. Okay. And yes, we're only 8 people, but what I've suggested to them is that we could build a course that is a mixture of online and, kind of face-to-face, be it can be remote, it can be video call, or we could send people out if we want to. Obviously, that'd be more expensive. But we can make it scalable. And that's the difference between having what's essentially a charity that runs qualifications. They don't have that same entrepreneurial angle on things. They don't see the opportunity that we see with, we could sell this to 200 colleges and solve a massive problem. And at the same time, we could, they're going to come back to us. If they do our faculty development program, and even if they bought all their equipment from somebody else, they're going to remember where they learned that knowledge. And then hopefully next time they're going to buy some equipment, they come to us. And that's how it works. We just keep going, because as soon as we solve that problem, another one will present itself undoubtedly. And then we work to solve that problem.
So you're using your knowledge of your products combined with Nicola's teaching background and merging that. Yeah, okay, that makes
it's all transferable skills.
Yeah,
especially teaching. Doing my teaching degree was really, really beneficial to me in sales, and I didn't realise it at the time. But it's only looking back, and certainly that ability to reflect on your own performance, and I think it's reflection on action, reflection in action. Yeah, those things that I do every single day now. That's doing that teaching qualification taught me how to do that, and that's all you're doing when you're selling something, is you're teaching somebody that how does your product solve their problem. It's a teaching moment.
Mark, you said something interesting earlier, you said many interesting things, but specifically, you were talking about you got to a point in January where you kind of burnt out, and it's because you were wearing all these hats and you were getting exhausted doing everything. But what made you stay in the game? What stopped you putting the business on eBay, as you mentioned?
It was seeing a different future. So it was at that point in January where I made the decision that I needed to have more partners, and I needed to have more people to help me to get the business to where I wanted to get to. And it had been a sticking point. We'd had the conversations previously, and I had been uncomfortable with giving up a lot of the business. But it was at that point when I was at my lowest, and I had to. It was really actually quite simple. It seemed, I thought about it for so long, but what it boiled down to is, who do I want to spend my time with? Because I thought, I could just employ people, I could employ more managers, create these departments, but you'd always have that professional relationship. And these guys that are coming in and being my partners, I've known them professionally, so I know they're brilliant in their jobs, but also they've been there for me personally over the last 10 years. And they're the people that I want to spend my time with. They're the people I want to speak to every day. And they're the people that I can actually go on holiday and say, can you look after my business for a week or two? And trust them to do that and know everything will be fine. And that it was as simple as that at the end of the day.
That's amazing. And I think really the last thing I really want to know is if you could go back to yourself, like, 2 years ago, or someone else starting in a business, what advice would you give them?
I don't know what advice I would give myself. Probably don't ever be too reliant on one person or one supplier or one customer, because that way you get stuck. So that one person I was relying on was me. I can't build it all on my own. I needed to replace myself, and that's what I'm in the process of doing. But I also had, when I was starting, I had one supplier, my former employer, and it was great for them because they were still benefiting from having me doing all the sales for them. But then when I started to get bigger and they started to see me as a threat, that relationship really changed, and they did everything they could to make it difficult for me, to the point now where I don't deal with them at all anymore. So to go from having one supplier and having 100% reliance on them to having zero, it took a while, it took about 18 months, but I learned a lesson there. And now when we have other suppliers who are saying, do more business with us, I can see it because they might want to have a bit more control over us, whereas we try to spread ourselves a little bit wider, just so that we're not overly reliant. I could lose a supplier tomorrow and pick up another one, and it wouldn't really matter. So that's probably the biggest thing. Don't be too reliant on one source for your income or your happiness.
Okay, amazing. So people watching this podcast, if they want to get in touch with you, where's the best place?
The best place is our website, simmonsskills.co.uk. But I'm also on LinkedIn. You can normally find me there. Just don't try and sell me anything because I'm busy.
So I've already done that. No, we'll be sure to include that in the comments. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been amazing hearing your story. So everyone, you've been listening to the Unrelenting Drive podcast. I'll see you at the next episode.